One of the most significant and dynamic movements in modern Christianity is the Christian homeschooling movement. It is literally changing the landscape of American Christianity. As someone who's been involved in the homeschooling community since 1994, I do have some familiarity with it. The Christian homeschooling movement is a non-denominational Christian initiative focused on educating young people outside of the realm of public and private schools. Technically, homeschooling is obviously nothing new, and it harkens back to the dawn of time as parents began teaching their children to prepare them for adulthood. In our nation originally, parents taught their own children, or local parents began organizing schools. As time went on, formal schooling became more organized, as we've seen in the example of Massachusetts. However, many parents have grown dissatisfied with schools, and a counter-cultural movement has emerged mainly since the 1970s. According to some, homeschooling is an act of conscientious objection to public schooling. But for many, homeschooling is not a rejection of something, but rather a commitment to potential, to hope, and to possibility, as found in the joy of learning and teaching in a family setting. In the early days of the movement, there were two main threads. One emerged from the work of John Holt, author of Learning All the Time, who pioneered the idea of self-directed learning. Also, Raymond Moore, a Christian learning expert, advocated less structure and more of a lifestyle of learning. Parents who followed this approach considered themselves home educators instead of home schoolers, and some were Christian and some were not. Rather than merely imitating school by using school textbooks in a classroom format but at home, home educators recognized that education was much broader than mere schooling. So the idea was to make home the base for a total, all-encompassing, lifelong learning experience. On the other hand, another thread existed simultaneously, made up primarily of Christians. This perspective focused on avoiding secular influences in public schools by doing school at home. This approach did include textbooks and a classroom format, even sometimes desks and blackboards. These homeschoolers were not concerned so much with a radically improved learning approach, but rather on imitating what the school does, but with Christian textbooks and better moral influences through building community with other Christian families and developing Christian friendships. In the homeschooling movement, these threads have merged over time. Now, home educators are able to take advantage of the full range of educational opportunities to provide top-notch educational experiences, best meeting the needs of each individual child. An array of amazing speakers and home-educated professionals have elevated the movement from being a grassroots experiment to a community of high-caliber educational specialists. Annual home education conferences take place in nearly every state, hosted by the statewide organizations that operate, in part, to advocate politically for educational liberty. Homeschooling entrepreneurs provide a wide range of products, and organizations like the Homeschool Legal Defense Association have helped families with legal issues that sometimes arise. Homeschooling is a critical, modern Christian movement. I believe it will have an impact that will only become more significant. One of the areas where homeschooling is only beginning to have an impact is in the area of leadership and community involvement. Homeschoolers are simply more involved in the community than others. A 2003 study found that 37% of U.S. adults are involved in ongoing community service activities. And that was for the general population. But for the homeschool graduates, they're involved in ongoing community service activities at the rate of 71%. For simple membership in community organizations after college, it's 88% to 50%. While students, homeschoolers have the flexibility in their schedules to devote themselves to a wide range of activities, including things like participating in worldview camps, serving as pages in state legislatures, interning with political candidates, and serving in a wide range of Christian activities in churches and in independent ministries. Because they are able to work daytime hours at part-time jobs when their peers are in school, homeschoolers can often be favored assets in the workplace. Because many home-educated students are able to fit their academics around other commitments so easily, these students are able to devote themselves to excelling in their areas of interest and often find themselves in leadership positions. Quite uniquely, because the young people being raised in this movement are being taught the principles that contributed to the founding of our nation, along with a Christian perspective of history, many find themselves interested in being future leaders in government, and it is anticipated that many will become even more involved in the state and national levels. For example, my very own state representative in my district here in Minnesota is a young woman who used to attend the homeschooling organization where I now teach. Homeschooling could be a road that takes many Christians into government service in the next generation, and this makes it a very important movement. One aspect of homeschooling that often is ignored is the evangelistic nature of the movement. Many families begin homeschooling for purely academic reasons and then find themselves drawn into Christian faith by the relationships they develop with believing home educators. And for many students, the Christian foundation of their educational experience is what acquaints them with faith. Many meet other believers at co-ops and classes they attend, and a natural sort of evangelism takes place in simply developing friendships and being together. In particular, I have noted that homeschooling tends to impact fathers in a very positive way. Many dads start homeschooling without giving it much thought, but as time goes on, they step into their roles as leaders as their hearts are turned toward their children in a Malachi 4:6 sort of way. While shouldering the responsibility for the education of their children, they are drawn to a new understanding of God's call on their lives as they fulfill their duty to their kids. With a strong sense that parenting is daily, full-time ministry, these families are having a Christian impact on the world. But for many, it is the homeschooling itself that provides a starting off point for their faith. The evangelism aspect of homeschooling is a critical part of the movement. There have been many offshoots of the movement that have caused subcultures within homeschooling to develop over the years, but largely, homeschooling is an interdenominational movement and focused on unity. People from a highly diverse set of religious backgrounds come together in the common goal of educating their children in ways that develop character and potential. It is not at all surprising that homeschooling has grown by leaps and bounds. With large numbers involved and more joining all the time, this movement is an important trend in the Christian world and in the world at large.